And thanks to at home for joining us this hour. Really happy to have you here. So are you tired of all the winning yet? Are you enjoying all of the greatness? May I introduce you to Tokelau? Tokelau is 3 teeny tiny islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That's our best approximation on our mapping software here at MSNBC HQ. Tokelau, again, it's 3 islands. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. About 1,500 people live there. One of the 3 islands that makes up Tokelau is apparently known for its famous swimming pigs. As for its economy, Tokelau kind of doesn't register on any international scale of economic measures because Tokelau doesn't really have much of an economy. It's basically subsistence, agriculture, and fishing, and, enjoying the swimming pigs. Donald Trump just imposed an across-the-board, no exceptions, 10% tariff on Tokelau. Take that, Tokelau bandits. You will screw over the United States of America no longer. May I also introduce you to the Keeling Islands. Keeling Islands are roughly halfway between Australia and Sri Lanka in the Indian Ocean. Keeling Islands is 27 islands, but 25 of them are uninhabited. Several of those uninhabited islands have a real plastic trash problem, but that is not because anybody lives there, but because plastic trash from other countries makes its way across the Indian Ocean and washes up there. The 2 islands of the Keeling Islands that are inhabited, out of the 27 islands there, those 2 inhabited islands have a total population of 593 people. Well, Donald Trump just declared trade war on the Keeling Islands. All 593 Keeling Islanders will now be hit with an American government 10% tariff that will apply to, anything they might ever want to export here to us. Make it here, Keeling Islands, if you're going to make it. May I introduce you to Jan Mayen Island. It is a volcano, a volcanic island mostly covered in glaciers, hundreds of miles from anything else in the Arctic Ocean. Jan Mayen, I think that's how you say it. It does have an airstrip, but nobody lives there. Population 0 humans, many polar bears. That said, rest assured, we, the American people, are now protected from the predatory economic piracy of that uninhabited island. Thanks to our genius strongman ruler who has put the American government to work, Donald Trump has just slapped a 10% tariff on Jan Mayen Island, just in case anyone ever moves up there and tries to screw us over with their Jan Mayen Island underpriced exports and stuff. On the other end of the world, there's Heard, H-E-A-R-D, Heard Island, and also McDonald Island. They're in Antarctica. They are only reachable by boat, and it takes 2 weeks by sea to get there from Australia. Heard and, what's the other one? McDonald Island, sorry. Heard and McDonald Island, I know I don't have to apologize. I'm not offending anybody. They're totally uninhabited, both of them. They're also active volcanoes, so even if you wanted to move there, even the penguins might caution you, right? They're active volcanoes, one on each island, on both Heard and McDonald Island. I will say those volcanoes and the penguins and seals who live there, they will never menace the American economy again as they have in the past by flooding us with their cheap exports of what, like fresh air, cool breezes, a waft of eau de penguin? I don't know. What do they send us? The uninhabited Antarctic volcanoes of Heard and McDonald Islands were just slapped by Donald Trump today with a steep 10% tariff. Are you tired of all the winning, America? Can you just feel the practical economic benefits that MAGA leadership is bringing to us at last? Isn't it a relief? Agence France Presse picked up on another one of these as well. This is super genius. quote, Britain's Falkland Islands, population 3,200 people and around 1 million penguins, got particular punishment from Trump's tariffs today. Quote, the South Atlantic territory was walloped with tariffs of not 10%, but 41% on exports to the United States. 41% tariffs on the Falkland Islands because, yeah. Our president waited until late in the day to announce these genius tariffs today. He waited specifically until just after 4 p.m. Eastern time because the financial markets close at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and he didn't want to see that reaction in real time. After the markets close, there's no active trading on the American stock markets, right? But people trade in futures that indicate essentially what they think the markets are going to do when they open up tomorrow. This is the lead right now at CNBC.com explaining how that's going. Quote, U.S. stock futures cratered as President Donald Trump unveiled sweeping tariffs of at least 10% and even higher for some countries, raising the risks of a global trade war that hits the already sputtering U.S. economy. Futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 1,069 points, or 2.5%. S&P 500 futures dropped 3.6%. NASDAQ 100 futures lost 4.5%. Yeah, are you tired of all the winning? Did you vote for the rich guy because you thought he'd be good with money? CNBC quotes Art Hogan, chief market strategist at B. Riley Wealth Management, saying, quote, what was delivered was as haphazard as anything this administration has done to date. And the level of complication on top of the ultimate level of the new tariffs is worse than had been feared and not yet priced into the market. At the New York Times, they described a broad range of economists, quote, revising their forecasts down for growth and up for inflation as a result of Mr. Trump's announcement. Nancy Lazar, chief global economist at Piper Sandler, had previously expected a flat next quarter in terms of U.S. economic growth. She now expects that U.S. economic growth in the second quarter may be negative. It may fall 1%, quote, because you're going to be increasing prices more aggressively, and it's going to negatively impact the consumer space more than we had anticipated. She said, quote, it's an immediate hit to the economy. And when she says it's going to negatively impact the consumer space, that's where we all live. That's the negatively impacted space, the place where regular humans live and have to spend money on stuff. We, in our office, contacted Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman just after Trump made his announcement today to ask his initial reaction. He told us this, quote, Trump's tariff announcement was full-on crazy. Not only is he imposing higher tariffs than almost anyone expected, but he's justifying them with completely false claims about other countries' tariffs. I don't know where his numbers are coming from, but they have nothing to do with reality. Krugman told us, quote, it's a really bad day for the U.S. economy. And here's something interesting. I think a lot of what Trump is trying to do in his style of leadership, as it were, is trying to create not only the impression of success when it's not there, like him saying his first 2 months in office have been perfect, which is hilarious. But he's also trying to create an impression that he is omnipotent, that he has all the power. He has powers that no other president has ever had. He has all the power, and nobody else in the U.S. government, nobody else in the United States of America has any power to do anything of their own, let alone any power to stop him. But to that point, it's worth getting specific about this. The reason we are all spectators here, while Donald Trump purposefully craters the U.S. economy and threatens to throw the entire world into a pointless trade war-fueled recession, if not depression, which is what he's doing tonight. The reason we're all spectators to that is because he has given himself, he says, the power to do this all by himself. When he was sworn in for the second term, he declared an economic emergency that would allow him to just burp out tariff proclamations on his own say-so whenever he felt like it, with nobody else in the government having to be involved in it at all. All because he said it's an emergency. Now, quick reminder here that when the previous president, Joe Biden, was leaving office, The Economist magazine decided to do a special report on the state of the U.S. economy that was being left to the next president. This was The Economist cover for that special report. It shows the U.S. economy as a bundle of bills posing as a rocket ship soaring into outer space. The headline, quote, "America's economy, the envy of the world." But then the new president took over, Donald Trump got in, and he immediately declared that this envy of the world economy was a complete disaster. It was an emergency. So much so that he needed effectively dictatorial powers to set new economic policies by fiat, just on his own say-so. Whatever he feels like is policy, it's just in effect because he said it. And with those emergency powers, that's how he's been able to single-handedly do his best to destroy the U.S. economy and potentially much of the industrialized world economies. There is a way, a legal way, a policy way to interrupt this dictatorship mid-catastrophe. And I don't mean time traveling back to last October to show voters tonight's headlines, although I do fantasize about doing something like that all the time. No, the actual way to stop this dictatorship mid-catastrophe, the way to stop this part of Trump's one-man wrecking ball operation against the U.S. economy is for Congress to do something very simple. For Congress to simply declare with a simple majority vote that actually there isn't an emergency. Yes, Trump proclaimed an economic emergency. That's how he gave himself these emergency powers. But Congress could simply just say, actually, no, there isn't an economic emergency. So no, he no longer has these powers. He is no longer empowered to single-handedly drive our country into this particular wall. They could do that. And tonight, the United States Senate did. They actually passed a bill like that about the supposed economic emergency we're in with regard to Canada. And they passed this resolution in the Senate that expressly says there is no economic emergency here. They passed it 51-48. All Democratic senators supported it, and so did these 4 Republican senators, Rand Paul, Susan Collins, Mitch McConnell, and Lisa Murkowski. Gave us a 51-48 vote. And that means it passes. It only takes a simple majority to pass this kind of resolution in the Senate. And so this resolution, effectively taking away some of Trump's emergency powers to set tariffs on his own say-so, it has passed the Senate. And that means it now goes to the House. And in the House, Democrats have been trying to bring up this exact same resolution since Trump started bludgeoning the economy with these tariff announcements. The House, like the Senate, is controlled by Republicans, but just like the Senate, the House is probably likely to pass this resolution if it got a vote. All the Democrats would vote for it, and enough Republicans in the House probably would join with Democrats to pass it. And if they did, with the Senate passing it and the House passing it, that would mean that the proverbial gun was taken out of Trump's hand and he could be stopped from shooting any more holes into the American economy and the global economy. The problem is that the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, saw this coming and took a dramatic and bizarre step to prevent any possibility that the House of Representatives would ever have to vote on anything like this to take away Trump's powers. The rule is if somebody brings up this kind of resolution in the House, after a certain number of days, it's supposed to be mandatory that it actually gets a vote. In order to avoid that mandatory vote, House Speaker Mike Johnson got the House to proclaim that the whole rest of this year in Congress is one long day. The whole rest of this Congress only counts as one calendar day. So that means multiple days will never elapse, technically, and that means they will never be forced to take the vote in the House, which would pass. And if it passed, that would save the American people and the American economy and the global economy from the tariff disaster that Trump is unilaterally imposing under emergency powers that allow him to act by fiat as if he is a dictator. So in other words, there is a cure to this disease. There is a readily available, dramatically effective, proven legal antidote to this poison. And Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson grabbed it out of our hands and flushed it down the toilet to make sure we can never take it so Donald Trump can keep doing this to the economy. Are you tired of all the winning? The vote tonight in the Senate to take away these emergency powers from Trump, with which he's doing all the tariff stuff. That vote in the Senate tonight does happen to be the largest and most significant rebuke to Trump that congressional Republicans have yet mustered in his second term in office. Theoretically, if people could pressure Mike Johnson into allowing a vote on this same resolution in the House, it would actually be a rebuke that meant something, that maybe saved the economy. But unless and until that happens, some Senate Republicans have shown a little strength here, but until anything happens in the House, it's Trump and House Republicans standing together to throw us all off the cliff. Also, we can slap those Antarctic penguins with big tariffs in case they ever turn into humans and start making stuff that they might want to sell us. That'll show them. And I don't know if these actions by Trump and congressional Republicans are why. Americans are sort of showing how they feel about Republicans in the way they are right now. But it does, this stuff about the economy, it does coincide with this big flurry of election results we've just had in the past week, in which Democrats are doing very, very well and Republicans are doing very poorly. Republicans are at least losing huge amounts of ground, if not just losing altogether. We're going to speak momentarily with Wisconsin Democratic Party Chairman Ben Wickler after that stunning 10-point win last night by the Democratic-backed candidate in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race. She was up against a Trump-endorsed ultra-MAGA candidate. He benefited not only from $25 million from Elon Musk, but also from a last-minute blockbuster campaign event hosted by Musk in Wisconsin, in which he gave out million-dollar checks and told Wisconsin voters that the fate of humanity rested on whether or not this MAGA candidate guy was going to win. Turns out none of that worked. We probably should have seen the result coming when we saw the big, feisty, very fired up protests in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the day of Elon Musk's event there this weekend. People covered both sides of the street. They made tons of noise. You see them with they had a huge wraparound banner that says "Wisconsin not for sale." I mean, there was many signs at that protest there against Elon Musk, as against Brad Schimmel, as against Musk and Trump's candidate for that Supreme Court seat. And of course, as I mentioned, this was Green Bay, Wisconsin, so they're blunt. Packer fans don't like Nazis. After the results came in last night, one Republican Party county chair in Wisconsin told Politico.com, quote, "I'm honestly shocked. I thought we had it in the bag. I thought Musk was going to be an asset for this race." Really? Have you looked around recently? Have you talked to any of your neighbors? So in Wisconsin, Susan Crawford won easily against Trump and Musk's candidate in that Supreme Court race. But it wasn't just her. There was also a superintendent of schools race, statewide race in Wisconsin. That went the same way, with the Democratic-backed candidate beating the Republican-backed candidate, and pretty easily. In those two deep, deep red congressional districts in Florida that also had elections last night, we saw the Republican candidates win in both, but Democrats cut way, way into their margins. Trump won in both of those districts by at least 30 points just in November, but last night, Democratic candidates cut those margins at least in half. Democratic candidate Josh Wheel ran in Florida's 6th district. He said the issue that resonated the strongest with voters for his campaign was definitely Trump and Musk attacking Social Security, something that I think Democrats all over the country are taking note of. Aurora, Illinois is the second largest city in Illinois after Chicago. They had their mayoral race last night. Now, the incumbent mayor in Aurora was a Republican-backed mayor. He was first elected in 2017. He was easily reelected in 2021. He expected to be reelected again last night, but the Republican-backed mayor of Aurora, Illinois was ousted last night, lost his seat to a challenger who was backed by Democrats. Last night's wins and surprisingly good showings for Democrats also follow, I think, some undercovered election results from Louisiana this past weekend. The Republican governor in Louisiana and the Republican-led legislature there put 4 different constitutional amendments before voters in Louisiana this weekend, and they lost. All 4 of them lost. In Louisiana, one independent Louisiana pollster interviewed by the Louisiana Illuminator explained that even in red state Louisiana, there was basically no keeping up with the organization and outrage on the Democratic side, even with the Republican governor and the Republican legislature all lined up behind these constitutional amendments. They couldn't get any traction. Starting early on in the process, quote, Democrats and black voters showed up in far greater numbers than Republicans during the early voting period. The pollster said, quote, I have just never seen an early vote this strong for Democrats. That follows, of course, other special elections earlier this year where we've seen Democrats pick up legislative seats in deep, deep red districts in places as far-flung as Amish country in Pennsylvania and in the great state of Iowa. And, it's in part probably some of these election results. It's in part, I think, some of the polling about how outraged and disgusted the American people are with what Trump and Musk are doing in Washington. I think it's in significant part what people are seeing on street corners, out in front of Tesla dealerships, out in front of Social Security offices and VA offices, with Americans protesting every single freaking day of the week now against what Trump and Musk are doing. When you put it all together, we're really starting to see some wind in elected Democrats' sails. With, of course, Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey galvanizing national support and national attention, rapturous attention from Democrats and critics of Trump and Musk, with his record-setting 25-hour-plus filibuster against Trump that ended last night. We've now got Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego saying that he will personally block all Trump nominations to the VA in protest of Trump's deep cuts to VA personnel. We've got Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz, of course, putting a hold against all Trump nominees to the State Department in protest of Trump's dismantling USAID. We've now, on top of that, got California Senator Adam Schiff putting a hold on Trump's nomination of Ed Martin to be U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. Ed Martin, who was personally at January 6th and has been using the powers of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. as its interim chief, exactly the way you think it might be used by someone who was at January 6th for Trump's attempt to violently overthrow the U.S. government and install himself in power for life. Today at Tufts University in Massachusetts, students walked out in support of the Tufts University grad student who was snatched off the street by masked federal agents this past week and flown to an immigration prison in Louisiana despite a judge's order that she not be moved out of state. Yesterday in Tennessee, did you see this footage? Look at this. This is an 80-year-old woman who was arrested at the state legislature in protest. She refused to leave. She was there in protest of Republican policies targeting even elementary school kids for arrest and deportation. She told state troopers in Tennessee that she did not mind being arrested, but she was not going to help them do it. They were going to have to carry her out. The troopers picked her up out of her chair and carried her out of the state capitol, 80 years old, and then put her in the patrol car and took her off to jail, bodily. Today in Washington, outside the Supreme Court, a raucous, loud, rollicking protest with a good sense of humor. While the Supreme Court heard yet another Republican abortion ban case, one of the things they did here at this protest is they made fake magazine covers, which you can see here. It's a fake People magazine cover there that says, Brett Kavanaugh, sexist man alive. A fake Scientific American, unscientific American cover featuring Samuel Alito instead of Alito. The FDA, who needs it when we've got Joe Rogan? Also a mock-up of Time magazine, Turn Back Time magazine. John Roberts, the man who presided over the death of the Constitution. And that was outside the Supreme Court today. Also in Washington today, a rally outside the Capitol, a rally in protest opposing federal cuts to HIV funding. Trump this week just absolutely decimating the FDA and the CDC, cutting core government funding for everything from HIV to Alzheimer's, to bird flu, to IVF, to measles, to everything in between. We're going to see hundreds of protests all across the country this weekend, Saturday, April 5th, what is likely to be the largest yet day of protest against this administration in these 70-some days since they've been in office. Tonight here on this show, we've got former FDA Commissioner David Kessler here in person. We've got Wisconsin Democratic Party Chairman Ben Wickler here. So much to get to tonight. So much money. Stay with us.